Just coming up to the top of the hour now, and we're going to be dealing with I think a very fascinating subject. I've been interested in this for a number of years now, which is how to reduce background noise within the contact center. Longer calls, tired staff, some of the symptoms of background noise. So I'll start off by introducing to you, for everyone who's just joining us now, all our panelists. So Colin Rawlings from Acoustics by Design. What is it you do for your day job?
So I spend most of my time writing reports and the rest of the time seeing people's buildings. And that's pretty much it, really. It's a lot of testing. I spend a lot of time in buildings on my own in the evenings, late at night, testing while there's nobody there, and then the same thing during the day, testing while all the agents are in. So yeah, it's an interesting. I get around the world. We do a lot of work in Europe and a little bit in the Middle East. I've yet to go to Russia. Yeah, but hopefully that will happen. So yeah,
and the acoustics in most buildings, would you say, is on a scale of 1 to 10? How would you define that?
Most buildings that I visit, I wouldn't work there. But that's just me. But some are good, some are bad. And I think that some people put more effort into sorting them out, and other people don't.
So Colin's going to be taking us through a presentation on how to reduce background noise. We're going to be doing your top tips and questions from the audience, always very, very popular. We've got also delighted to be joined by Richard Kenny from Plantronics. Welcome to you, Richard. Richard's a regular on our webinars, has attended, I think, spoken on 4 webinars over 4 years now, and so Richard will be taking us through a presentation on acoustic intelligence, which I think is going to be fascinating, and then we'll be doing some more top tips and questions. So if you'd like everyone to log into the chat room, the address for that is callcenterhelper.com/chat. We will be doing tips and questions through the chat room, and there's a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates at your choice for the best tip, which I'm going to ask Colin to pick the best tip at the end of today's webinar. We'll announce that on Twitter. I know a lot of you do like to share this, and there's some sort of quite in-depth research here, so you can watch that on the same link as you've dialed into today, and there will be a white paper coming out to you as well from Plantronics. We'll just have a quick look into the chat room. If you want to log in, very simple, first name, last name, and email. Please, no commercial messages through the chat room. And once you're logged in, you can download the webinar slides in from there. In fact, this is what the chat room looks like. You see all the people on the right-hand side logged in, and we'll see we've got Paul dialed in from South Africa and Doug dialed in from Canada. So, and then if you want to download the webinar slides, just on this little link here, and if you want to get a chat log, it's just on that little button down there. So nice and easy, and we try to make it very interactive. So having seen that on the chat room, I'd like you in 1 or 2 words to log into the chat room and say, how would you describe noise levels in your contact center? In 1 or 2 words, how would you describe noise levels in the contact center? Quiet, noisy. Let's see how you would describe it. Chris says it's very noisy in his contact center. We'll just turn off the webcams now so we don't distract anyone. So Rob's saying it can be noisy at times. Retha says it's noisy. Leslie says not great, too noisy. Paul says it's manageable. Matthew says it's like a train station. So I guess that's a major terminus at busy times rather than Abergavenny station on a Sunday. Doug says it's noisy and getting worse as we add more agents. I guess it's a link to family people. Michael says sometimes loud. Let's have a look. Vinay says it's very bad if you have sales agents on the same floor. I guess salespeople probably can be a bit
should be loud,
a bit louder than most. Chris says I agree with Doug. Let's take a couple more, and Paul and Stephen I think are just typing in currently. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to drill down and ask the question so we can get some sort of overall level on that. We've themed this as regards sort of like a World Cup theme. So if you just like to vote on how loud is it very loud, like England scores the winning goal? Is it loud, like a penalty is missed? Is it occasionally loud, a referee makes a bad decision? Is it medium, which is perhaps the team's warming up? Or is it quiet, like the stadium is empty? So if you just like to vote on the choices on there, so select a vote between very loud and quiet. Colin, where do you think the audience is likely to come up on the scale?
I would imagine under the penalty is missed, loud, as a rule.
Okay, well let's have a look, and we'll see where the calibration comes. And this is
I'm wrong.
Quite interesting. It's almost like a normal distribution, I would say, around occasionally loud. Referee makes a bad decision. Interestingly, Richard, there's no quiet or extremely loud.
No, I think the quiet one's concerning, that there's nobody thinking that their stadium is nice and quiet and able to concentrate, or their call centre, sorry, up in the stadium. Doesn't surprise me. I think very loud would be so disruptive that would stop business in a lot of places. So I'm not surprised that there isn't anybody up there. But yeah, it's worrying that it's not distributed further down the graph on this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's only one contact centre I've been into where I was shown round. They said, when you're going round, can you keep the noise levels down, please? Because we like to have it like a library. It's high-end technical support. And we'd like our advisors to be able to concentrate on solving the problem. And they had big screens between them. But that's only one call centre that that wanted it to be more like a library.
Yeah.
So
I know some people quite like it to be a bit loud in the background noise, just to give the perception of it being busy. So to some degree, I think people may keep it that way, but it's probably verging on too loud by the sounds of it sometimes.
Yeah. Right. Well, we're now going to go across to a presentation from Colin Rawlings from Acoustics by Design, and Colin is going to give us some hints and tips and some background information on how we can reduce background.
I am. So I've got a small presentation that just runs through the basics of acoustics, really, without going into the detail of it and getting too technical. And then some ideas of how to reduce the noise in the background. So just to start off, my name's Colin Rawlings, as I've been introduced. I'm an acoustician. I work just in open plan offices or office spaces, and I've got quite a lot of experience with sound masking, which some people will know as white noise or pink noise. And obviously we're here today to talk about contact center acoustics and the benefits of treating the acoustics for those contact centers. So if we look at good acoustics, it can improve staff retention. That's been proved. It can increase productivity. There's been quite a few studies over the last 10 years by various universities in the US, in Finland, that have shown 10 to 15% increase with the right sort of background sound or the right kind of acoustics in offices. It can reduce stress, which in turn will reduce absenteeism, and it can improve call quality. That's also been proved, and in fact by a client of mine recently who did their own testing before and after we started any work with them, and we've shown a marked improvement on the call quality. And consequently, of course, that will reduce errors and misunderstandings between the agents and the customers, and ultimately it should improve customer satisfaction if you get the acoustics right. As Richard says, that some people like to have slight background noise because it makes the call center sound busy, but of course that doesn't have to be noise of other people talking particularly. So noise complaints, we just want to know, are you getting noise complaints, and if so, is it from the staff? We're going to run a poll now. Is it from the staff? Are the complaints from customers, or staff and customers, or do you receive no complaints about background sound?
So we're just going to put the poll up there. So are you getting complaints about background noise? The votes are from agents or advisors, from customers, from the quality team, or you get no complaints at all. So you can vote on multiple answers on this one. So be interesting to know how many from the quality team we're likely to get, because that sort of is really impacting whether the call recordings are being compromised. So let's just have a, just waiting for a couple more people to vote, and let's share the results. Fascinating, yeah. The 71% of our audience getting complaints from agents and advisors, 46% from customers, 25% from the quality team, which is the impact that's being made on the call recordings, and only 11% are getting no complaints
about background
noise.
Yeah.
Colin, is that what you would expect? Or?
I personally would have expected probably more from the customers and less so from the agents. But there you go. Every call centre is different.
Yeah, I guess customers might think it, but not unless you're.
And maybe they don't complain.
Then they may not say.
Yeah.
The person couldn't hear me.
Very true.
Maybe respect it another way. So,
and I'd be also interested to find out how many people actually do quality testing internally anyway. I don't know whether everybody does.
Yeah. And Richard, do you find a lot of feedback quality teams saying about people not being able to hear?
Well, I suppose they're the one person that listens in on a regular basis, so they can hear the differences from day to day, whereas your customer, you want to hope, is not calling you on such a regular basis. So they might just think, oh, it's a busy period. We'll come back at a different point, or have to call them on a bad day. Whereas for the quality teams, they know exactly what's going on. They listen in every day to these things. So I would expect to see that sort of level coming from them.
Mm. So Colin, if you'd like to carry through your thoughts on what we can do about these complaints.
No problem. So I just want to start by talking about sound and noise, because there is a difference between the two words. So sound is everything that we hear, and as human beings, our ears are tuned to listen to frequencies between about 50 hertz and 20,000 hertz, and particularly for the 500 hertz to 4,000 hertz, which is the speech range. So our ears are designed effectively to listen to our own voices, so they're very acute in that range. And noise is everything that annoys us, and of course that's different for each kind of person. So I'm a Radio 4 listener, but I know that my 17-year-old daughter can't stand Radio 4, so for what is a pleasant sound for me is an annoying sound for her. So it's good to keep the difference between sound, which is everything you can hear, and the fact that it's a noise, which is annoying in your mind. So I've got a couple of clips here, and this is, first of all, is a picture of a very busy swimming pool, which most of us will be familiar with the sound of that, and hopefully that's playing now. Just to give you an idea of that, but I'm sure we all know what a busy swimming pool sounds like. And then the second clip I've got is an aeroplane, and I suspect that most of us will know what an aeroplane sounds like when you're sitting in the cabin. And then the third one is of a library, and I suspect most of us probably know what that sounds like too. And what I want to explain about the difference in the sounds is first of all, the swimming pool is what we would call a very aggressive sound. There's a lot of different tones in there, different frequencies, different voices, everybody having a conversation, lots of screaming and shouting, etc. So that's what we would call a very aggressive noise, and you wouldn't want that all day, every day. And then moving on to the aeroplane, of course, that is a very steady sound. It's a loud sound, so in the cabin it's probably about 70 decibels, so it's quite a loud sound, but it's very constant. There's no real changes in that, in the levels. And in fact, you can sit in an aeroplane, have a conversation with your neighbor, and not hear conversations from seats behind you, etc. So that is a form of sound masking, albeit at a greater level. And obviously, if you're in a plane and you're hearing the sound of the engines, it's quite a comforting thought. And then finally, on the library, that's obviously generally a very quiet space. And so when somebody coughs or talks or drops a book in the library, it tends to be very obvious. And my final picture, interestingly, is of a contact center or a call center. And I couldn't find any clips on the web of a noisy contact center.
We probably ought to do some recordings of that.
Yeah,
in fact, if anyone in the audience has got a recording they'd like to send in to us, it'd be quite fascinating to
have that.
To hear.
Yeah. But I think we can probably all imagine what that sounds like. So it's just the differences in the sound. So they all have different levels. I mean, a library is very quiet, but of course if you're trying to concentrate and somebody's coughing or talking in a library, that is very distracting. Where in an aeroplane, although the background sound level is very high, it's actually quite a comfortable position to be in. And the reason for that, I'm just going to explain dynamic very briefly. So in this graph that you can see here, there's 35 decibel background sound level. That's the natural background sound level with nobody saying or doing anything in the building. And then that runs out over time towards the right. So this is just a sample over 120 seconds of a sound. And you can see that the maximum peak sound is 75 dB there. So the dynamic range effectively is the difference between the maximum and the minimum. So here it's 40 dBA. And that is an aggressive
just
sound.
Into layman's terms, what would be an equivalent sound of
well, the other
75 dB?
Oh, 75 dB. That's well, if you shout at about 65 dB. But of course, sound is a logarithmic scale.
Yeah.
So it's not simply.
So 75 is much louder than someone actually shouting.
Massive. Yeah. Massive. At least twice as loud. Yeah. So yeah. And so that is a fairly aggressive sound. And the ideal would be to achieve a dynamic range of 0. Rather than looking at the actual maximum level of sound that we've achieved here, we're actually looking at the dynamic, and that is important, because in a lot of the call centers that I've tested, the actual level of sound at the peak is maybe 50, 60 dB, 65 dB. So we're not talking huge numbers, but it's the aggressiveness of the noise. And why is that then? So in most buildings we have a ceiling. And so if we look at the agent here that's talking, he's talking into his LCD screen, so you're getting sound reflected off the LCD screen. And at that distance, it's likely to double the volume of his voice anyway. And then it's being reflected off the windows and off the ceiling and off the walls and off the top of the desk, etc. And of course, if you multiply that by X number of agents, then you can see how you can get this cacophony of sound in the space. And that's simply because the sound is not being absorbed anywhere, it's just being reflected. And this slide really just shows you the measurements that we've taken in a previous study for the noise radius. So you've got the agent kind of in the middle there, and as they speak, clearly the words that they say can be heard up to 15 meters away, which is a huge distance. So all of the other agents in that radius effectively are being disturbed or distracted, or can hear words clearly from the one agent. So what to do about it? Well, we've talked about the ABCs of acoustics. So there really is only 3 parts of this. So the first one is to absorb. So that's absorbing the sound energy. And the only way to absorb sound energy is either to dissipate it, which means you've got to have an enormous room, or to absorb it in soft materials where the sound will in effect wriggle its way into the soft material and then not get out again, and actually dissipates as heat. So absorb noise close to the source, and in most cases in open planned offices, assuming that you've got carpet on the floor, which will absorb about 20% of sound, the best way is to go for the ceiling. So you can get a ceiling tile like the one we're sitting underneath here, which will absorb 100% of the sound, the incident sound. Where some ceiling tiles will reflect 90% of incident sound. So
to the layman, I got to say the ones we're just looking at now
look like a ceiling tile.
Any other ceiling tile in any other building.
But the standard tile that's used most in fit out and refurbishment is a tile called the Dune tile, and that reflects 45% of sound. So the choice of ceiling is quite important. For absorbing. So there's absorb, and you can also do some work on the wall. So behind us we've got a wall here that's a sound absorbing wall that absorbs about 80% of the sound.
What we're just going to do is we're just going to see if we can actually put up onto the webcam there, just to show you some of the background we're in. So it's a bit ad hoc, but hopefully on the camera there you can see the actual
white ceiling.
Ceiling tiles. Looks like just like a normal ceiling, but quite clever here are these panels on the walls. Hopefully you can see that, which are these are, what are they?
We call that resorb, and it's got a Bazotec foam behind a fabric. So the fabric allows all the sound to travel through it, and then the sound gets absorbed into the Basotec foam behind. So these are just printed panels. Yeah. So that's absorb. And then we talk about block. So B is for block, so that's blocking. So that's screens on desks. Not always popular for open plan offices, but as an acoustician I'd have to say that they make a huge difference to how far sound will travel across the room, providing there are sufficient height. And I always recommend 1200 above the floor, 1200 mil above the floor, or 480 mil above your average desk in order for them to be effective. If the agent's mouth is effectively above the screen, then it's not really performing much of a blocking function. So B is for block, which is blocking the direct path of sound, and then finally C is for cover, which is sound masking. As I said before, sometimes called white noise, pink noise, and it is normally a series of speakers that emit a sound similar to rushing air or air conditioning, but it should be a random sound. So C is for sound masking, masking unwanted noise. And there is actually a D here, which is discipline, which Richard's going to talk about probably more than myself. But certainly from my point of view, I've been into contact centres and seen people shouting across to the supervisor, etc., or vice versa. Of course, that really needs to be disciplined.
Yeah, I've also gone into quite a number of call centres where I'm shown around and we have a discussion right next to an advisor sat on the phone. So what that's doing to background noise, I don't know. And I don't know if anyone in the audience has got this, but there's often the sales bell or some sort of klaxon for winning a prize. Great for a bit of motivation, but again, does nothing for audio.
If you're on a call clarity at the time, yeah. So D for discipline. So just coming back to the absorption for a minute, we've talked about the ceiling tile that we're sat under here, but it's important that we go back to the frequencies. I talked about speech frequencies being 500 to 4000 hertz. So when you're choosing a tile or whatever sound absorbing materials that you're going to use, it's important to look at, and most manufacturers will have a graph of the octave bands to make sure that they're going to absorb sufficiently in the right frequencies, because some materials are designed for low frequencies or very high frequencies. So this is actually the tile that we're sitting under, the Rockfon Sonar tile, which absorbs 100% of all the sound in the 500 to 4000. This image just gives you an idea if you haven't got a traditional ceiling. I see a lot of buildings now where they don't have the drop ceiling. There's no ceiling tiles, no ceiling grid, and it's just open to the soffit. So there are other solutions for that, if you like. This is actually Plantronics' office in Cologne, which has plastered ceiling, and so we've used these sound-absorbing discs fitted to the ceiling.
They look a little bit similar to the discs you see in the Royal Albert Hall, which is that what they
could
brought in to reduce the echo in the hall?
Yeah. So they again absorb 100% of the sound, and interestingly, of course, they absorb them on the reflection from the plaster ceiling as well. So they absorb sound from underneath and from above, and you can get them in different colours and things, so make the place look more interesting. But what does absorption do to that dynamic graph? Well, you can see that the overall sound, the 75, has now dropped to 73, and the background sound levels only dropped by 1 dB. And interestingly, the dynamic range is still much the same at 39. So by introducing absorption, we've not actually changed the aggressive nature of the sound. All we've done is make it slightly quieter. And of course, a lot of people think that we should just make everything quiet. So it doesn't necessarily help the noise issue. It just makes things quieter. So back to blocking. So screens on desks, I've mentioned 1200 above the floor or 480 above the desk is the ideal. These ones that we're showing here are in 120-degree desk format, which I prefer, again, because you never have one agent pointed directly at another agent opposite. So again, that reduces some of the noise and distraction. And these ones are wave screens, so they're 1300 high, in fact, in the middle, down to 1100 high at the edge, which just means that you can rock back in the chair and still see colleagues, etc., have a conversation. Doesn't feel quite so isolated.
So 1200, that's about 4 feet high, is it?
I've no idea.
Something like that. Yep.
I'm too young for feet. And so just a couple of diagrams about that. So we've got speech on the left-hand side here at 60 dB, which is probably quite high. So within 2 meters, you're still going to hear 60 dB. This is with no screens on at the moment. And at 6 meters, you're going to hear about 55 decibels of that conversation. And at 9 meters, it's still only dropped to 53 dB. And it's worth bringing in STI here, which is Speech Transmission Index, which is a scale of 0 to 1 of how well you can hear specifically speech, again, between those frequencies that I've mentioned. So at the speaker, it's 1, and further away at 9 meters, it only drops down to 0.8, so you're still hearing a huge amount of that conversation. Now, if we put the screens in, same speech at 60, screens at 1200 high, within 2 meters, that's dropped to 50 dB and 0.9, and at 9 meters further away, that's dropped to 35 decibels, which is probably really just background sound level now, and 0.6. You're hardly hearing any of the conversation at all now. So that's the difference of putting screens on the desk. And so what does blocking do to the dynamic range? Not much, really. In fact, it slightly increases the higher end, because you're getting sound reflected off the screens now. So the absorption's good at absorbing sound, stopping it reflecting down the room, propagating down the room, and the same thing with the screens on the desks. It stops the sound traveling down the length of the room, but it does nothing for this aggressive noise in the office or the contact center. So back to sound masking. So series of speakers normally put above the ceiling plenum, so they're tucked away and hidden, and they generate a background sound, normally about 42 to 50, somewhere around there, decibels in the background. Nobody really knows it's there unless they see you install it. And what that does to this diagram for the STI and the speech over distance is same speech at 60 dB. Now at 2 meters, that's dropped to 48, and at 9 meters, it's effectively below the background sound level, so you're not hearing any conversations at 9 meters, and even at 6, really you're only at 0.5, which is a good number.
And these are installed sort of behind the
They're in here. In fact, they're running in this room now, so yeah, they're providing privacy between this meeting room and then the next meeting room, and so nobody really knows they're here,
right?
Apart from Richard now.
And it sounds a bit like I've got to say, it's almost like the air conditioning system.
Indeed,
really.
yeah.
That does make me wonder how many buildings I've been into where I've heard air conditioning is actually possibly a white noise generator.
Could well be. And in the UK now, there's the legislation for air conditioning means that it can't be louder than 35 decibels.
Oh.
Well, in all the studies that have been done about background sound levels, most of us would be happier in 40, 42, 45 dB of background sound level. So air conditioning now is not now loud enough to create that on its own.
Right.
And of course, then you get double glazing in buildings, etc. So they cut out the background sound level that you would have had from outside. So buildings just generally are getting quieter and noisier at the same time. So the dynamics, so this is the interesting one. So we've lifted the background sound level, which was 35 dB, up to 48 dB. So effectively we're covering or masking all of this sound below this line. So you can see that the dynamic range has significantly shifted to 28 dB. So that the aggressiveness of that sound has gone away, although it's slightly louder.
Doesn't actually reduce the noise. It just masks.
It hides
so
it.
You don't really hear it.
Indeed.
So
yeah.
From a user's point of view, what it also has is it minimises the gaps between conversations. Which, if you're hearing the hubbub of background noise that suddenly stops, you think, "What's going on?" You look up and look around. So that constant sound level is what it's increasing, which is a bit less distracting as a user in this office.
But it also does some good for sales teams, because salespeople, you always think of being quite loud and outward going, but lots of them are quite nervous about talking in front of colleagues, etc., making sales calls. And I see other buildings, not contact centres particularly, but other buildings where the salespeople are taking their mobile phones out to corridors to make calls, and that's simply because the office is too quiet. They feel too self-conscious on the telephone in a quiet office. So by raising the background sound level, you can actually make people feel more confident, which is quite important. So the noise radius, and I'm nearly there for those that are bored now with me and my voice, the noise radius with treatment you can see drops down to 5. This, as I say, was a study that I did in a contact centre, so I actually changed the ceiling and I put screens on the desk and I did the testing with and without sound masking, with or without screens, and with and without the ceiling tile. So the net result of all of those, the A, B and the C, was a drop from 15 metres clear speech to just 5 metres, which is a huge change just by treating it. Now there are some standards, and they're not law in the UK. So unless you exceed the health and safety limits of noise, which Richard's going to talk about a little bit. But there is a fairly new standard out, 2012, the 3382 Part 3, which talks about acoustics and the measurements of acoustics in open plan offices. And we can obviously as a company test to those standards, etc. And it's more being part of a, not so much a compliance, because you don't have to comply to it, but I'm trying to think of the right word here, but best practice. Thank you, Richard. So there are some companies that I deal with which have taken this standard and kind of applied it so that they can feel that they've taken some steps towards cutting down the background noise. So just as a summary of that standard, really, they talk about distraction distance, which I called the radius of distraction as well, I think. And then you've got spatial decay, which is how far sound, particularly speech, will travel down the room. And then you've got the actual level of speech at 4 metres and the background sound level, which, because I've really talked about the background sound level, has a huge part of this standard. And just for the last slide, really, I extracted out of the bottom of the standard here, where they've got the informative bit, that they've actually written in the standard, most open plan offices have poor or insufficient acoustic standards. And in the paragraph below, they've actually put open plan offices with good acoustics, good acoustic conditions are rare. And this is actually written into the BS standards, which I found quite interesting.
Bit of a damning,
yes,
damning
exactly.
standard there, if it's saying that.
And so that's it, really. I mean, in summary, it's just about applying the ABCs, and generally speaking, you need all three in order to achieve a good acoustic standard.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're now just going to go back and we're going to take some top tips and questions from the audience. And there is a bottle of champagne or box of chocolates for the best tips sent through. So let's. We asked the question earlier on the chat room. What have you tried to reduce background noise within our audience? So let's have a look at what our audience have said. Stephen says, we work in a 1970s open plan building and have recently refurbished and have introduced acoustic ceiling tiles rather than traditional ceiling tiles. So that's a good move. That's a pretty easy fix from,
It is if you know that you need to put acoustic ceiling tiles in, and you don't just take the advice from the contractor about what ceiling tiles they're going to install.
So check the graphs on the on how you do that. Rob says we use fabric screens on desks and artwork canvases on the wall. I guess artwork canvases is a fairly simple.
Yep.
Saying it also cheers up the call centre.
Indeed, you can use it for marketing, and it can come out of the marketing budget, which is more important.
Ah, there you are. There's a tip.
Now we haven't got any.
Ruth says we use glass partitions between agents. You were saying about using baffled screens might be better there.
Well, glass partitions is okay, providing that you've got a balance of the absorption. So glass is obviously an excellent sound blocker. So if you've got desk screens made of glass, they will prevent the sound travelling down the room. But of course they do reflect the sound as well. So in terms of the aggressive noise, they will increase the amount of noise in the space, albeit it won't travel so far.
Okay, so let's have a look what else we got. Lisa says we use two things. Our agents are in cubicles with padded sides and have a higher front panel to absorb sound.
Perfect.
We also have installed a white noise system that can be adjusted based on the core volume in our contact.
Right.
Is that something you suggest actually changing?
Well, no, there are systems around that will alter level.
based on the background
sound.
Yeah. Oh, okay, very interesting. So let's take a couple of tips from the audience. Retha says we need to be aware. Agents need to be aware of their fellow agents and keep a level tone of voice. In coaching and training, it is also reiterated to keep a level tone of voice.
Right, Rich is going to talk a little bit about this.
I guess that's somewhat easier said than done, Richard, at times.
Yeah, and sometimes you're trying to overcome the people's natural speech characteristics, especially if they're an enthusiastic person. And you know, if you're as a customer ringing and find someone enthusiastic, you love to hear that sort of enthusiasm in their voice and want to come back to dealing with them again. So you don't really want to tune that out of people and end up speaking to a whole load of monotone robots. But yeah, having some consideration of those around you is probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I think that's probably very key. So let's have a look what else we've got. Have a chat system available to agents and supervisors. I guess this is an online web chat. This stops the agents from shouting across or getting up to talk to the supervisor. I guess the shout is probably the worst one, Colin.
Indeed, yeah.
And let's see what else we've got through. Taught staff are taught never to hold a discussion. I guess this ties in with your discipline.
Indeed.
Behind any phone agents, just in case they're on the phone. A noisy call centre gives customers a perception that you are not a professional organisation, especially if that customer was not happy when they called in. So quite interesting. We've got some more tips we'll go back to later. In the meantime, just before we hand across to Rich, I'd like to put up a short poll. And that poll, we're going to have a look at use of headsets in noise cancelling. And just want to do a quick poll that says, what headsets are you using? You select all that apply. Do you use one ear, which is known as monaural, two ears, which is either known as binaural or binaural. I'm never sure what's the right answer to that one.
I definitely know this one. Depends which continent you're from, but we tend to use binaural.
Okay, so do your headsets have one or two ears? Do you use noise cancelling? And then do you use corded headsets, and do you have wireless headsets? So we've selected all that apply, and we'll have a look on that. I see, I've got to say, mainly monaural headsets in most of the contact centres. Do you find that noisy ones tend to use two ears?
No, I think people purely do it by a buyer's preference. And in the UK, it does seem to be monaural is the preference. If you go into continental Europe, it's almost the other way around, where it's actually about 70% are binaural headsets. And that proportion is actually increasing as we go through the years. We've seen more and more headsets being binaural in continental Europe.
Jonty, I just wanted to say, the sound quality seems to have dipped out.
Okay, well we'll make some changes and see if we can improve some of the settings there. So let's go across and look at the results that we've got coming through, and I'm going to put the results up on the screen there. So Richard, 70%. The audience using binaural, so we've got a more enlightened audience, do you think, or
we absolutely
more European?
To go back to your list of where people are registered from to find that out, but yeah, that's quite a surprising result when I look into some of the sales figures. We obviously check how much of our products are going out and we'll see which is popular, but that's quite surprising for the UK to see that sudden shift away from the mono, the single earpiece. I suspect that, I wonder if you and I have both visited much of more of the larger contact centres which standardise on the one earpiece, and what we're seeing here is just a different type of contact centre joining us today that are using, you know, the two earpiece ones.
Yeah, indeed. So quite a range there. Only 14% of people using wireless headsets. We'll go off and have a look at that in a short while. So I'm now going to change across to Richard Kenny from Plantronics, and Richard's going to share with us some ideas on acoustic intelligence and also the role that headsets can play in reducing or helping to reduce background noise.
Yeah, thank you, Jonty. I think Colin's idea of calling this the fourth discipline of acoustics, is quite good, in that a headset is never going to solve all of your noise problems, but the journey to solving your noise problems can sometimes be a long one. So it's sometimes a case of using the contact center headsets to the best effect in the immediate time frame now to try and get around some of these issues, and that discipline will help you get through some of the background noise that you're issuing. So the first one is this idea of, if any of us have walked around a contact center, you've probably seen headsets being worn incorrectly. There's an example on screen at the moment where I know our headsets are particularly well advanced in technology, but we're not quite there on mind reading yet. So having the microphone pointing up to the top of your head is not going to be beneficial to anybody involved. And we see it having two disadvantages. One is that you can have the headset worn off the back of your ear. And one thing for all of you using the binaural headsets to check is this idea that sometimes your employees will like to listen in on other conversations. They will like to collaborate with the people around them. So what they often do is they wear one of those earpieces pushed off the back of their ear, and only one earpiece is actually covering their ears. And that means that they're basically not getting the full benefit of the binaural headset. They're not going to be able to hear the customers correctly. They're going to need to concentrate harder to hear them. Potentially there's more mistakes going to come in and longer calls there if you're not wearing the headset properly. The other side is that customers may not hear you correctly either. You may, if you could look into your call records, you may be finding constant requests to repeat yourself, longer calls, longer than you'd expect. And also, in the worst case, you may hear about customers overhearing other conversations around them. So really just a simple tip, to be honest, is walk around your contact center on a regular basis and audit it. Getting the microphone just onto the corner of your mouth, about 2 fingers width away, is the exactly right place to get the best noise cancelling and to make sure that it's your associate's voices being heard and not anyone else's, not any background noise. If you've got clear tubes on there, make sure those are replaced regularly, and also make sure they're present, because again, I've gone into so many contact centers and found them being used to stir coffee or stir sugar into tea, that sort of stuff. Make sure those clear tubes are replaced regularly. And also a nice simple one, but make sure those ear cushions on your headsets are replaced regularly as well. They have a surprisingly big impact on the acoustics of a phone call, and we do recommend they're replaced on a 6-monthly basis because they can get blocked up a little bit from people wearing them day in, day out. So just going back to that headset poll, there is no right headset type for an environment. We recommend that it's actually a very personal decision. We're finding that if you're in an environment where you're needing to do more collaboration, if you need to talk with the people around you because you want to give a group answer to a call, then that single earpiece on a headset is very good. Dual earpiece is very good for much more concentration, but again, all of this applies only if you're wearing that headset correctly. If you've got a dual earpiece, the binaural headset, and it's being worn incorrectly, it's going to make matters worse for your team. So, like I said earlier on, just use the D in discipline to walk around and audit the contact center on a regular basis. Now, one of the hidden downsides of having a noisy environment in the contact center is that it significantly increases your potential to fall foul of the legislation in this area. The noise at work legislation from around 2006 dictates an 85 decibel sound exposure level through the working day. Now, you can go and measure that background noise quite quickly with simple phone applications, and none of you will be anywhere near 85 decibels. It's designed around car factories, coal mines, steel plants, that sort of thing. But what you can find is that people are listening at 85 decibels through their headset. The reason for doing that is that they need a clear 20 decibel gap between the background noise and the listening level. This is something that's been proved time and again through research. It's the ability to hear what your customer is saying above the background noise. So if you're starting to get up to 60, 65 decibels on the background noise, you're really getting close there to forcing your employees to listen at a level that is going to be breaking these noise at work regulations. So for me, this is probably one of the biggest things about getting you to have a nice, quieter environment. We'd recommend something around about a 50 decibel level, 50, 55 as a good background noise level, just for getting the right hearing level for being compliant with these noise at work legislation. Now, we're often asked, can we provide some form of noise cancelling headsets? I've got a nice example of one of the Formula 1 teams there using them. These were the first guys to bring them into sort of big commercial use. But also, if you ever fly regularly, you'll see the Bose Quiet Comfort headsets in regular usage. Now, these type of noise cancelling headsets are absolutely brilliant at reducing the impact of constant repetitive sound. So if you've got noisy air conditioning, if you're on a plane or a train, these headsets actually listen to the sound around them, predict the sound, and play the opposite version of that sound into your ears so that it cancels out the noise. What they're not very good at is actually reducing the impact of voice. Voice is a very unpredictable sound source. So actually these noise-cancelling headsets do not do a particularly good job of reducing the sound conversations around you. They also work in two different ways. The cancelling out of the rumbling sound is a sort of low frequency, which they can do through electronics. But to cover up some of the high frequencies, they actually have to seal around your ears and completely get rid of some of that background noise. And what we've found when we've done trials of headsets like this in contact centres is it's very impractical. They've got to be positioned very well, and they get quite hot because they have a large area and they're covering your ear, both ears, through the whole working day. And people aren't willing to make that trade-off of being really uncomfortable through the working day to get that perfect sound quality. So for us, the technology does not exist yet to make these noise-cancelling headsets a good solution to background noise within contact centres. One of the other areas that we're looking at the moment is what's happening around contact centres and technologies in general that can make it hard to hear for people. So the figure was something like about 70% of the complaints are coming from your agents. Some of that might be down to the fact that, again, they can't hear clearly. They can't hear the customers clearly because the background noise is high. But sometimes what we're seeing as well is the contact centres are increasingly moving over to soft phones. And when you use soft phones, it gives you this big choice of USB headsets to choose from. But a lot of those headsets are not designed for speech. Colin mentioned earlier on that a lot of the speech frequencies are concentrated around the 500 to 4,000 hertz frequency range. And I've been practicing with this word today, John. It's fricatives, or consonants that's the type of sound in that particular area. And those are the sounds that give intelligibility to speech. And all of our contact center headsets are designed to enhance the sound around those frequency levels and to make those consonants or fricatives easier to hear. If you go out and use some form of USB headset that is designed for music and multimedia, those enhance the bass. They really are focused on the lower octaves, that 125 or 250 hertz range. So they make your music sound fantastic, but they do really make speech much harder to hear, and you've then got to concentrate much harder against the background noise to pick out the details in that speech. Now, we're fairly lucky as an organisation, and those 14% of you that have got wireless headsets are very lucky as well, in that sometimes if you can't make the environment or the acoustic environment come to you, you can go to the acoustic environment. If you have a wireless headset, it does give you the ability to walk up and find a corridor, find an acoustically good area to go and make that phone call with a customer. Again, it's not ideal for everybody. It's not going to work in every single contact center, but for those of you that are in the more informal areas where your staff have mixed roles, some of them need to concentrate, some of them need to make calls, then really look at the idea of wireless headsets to let those people that are making an intensive phone call, to give them the ability to walk off to a different area within the building and make that phone call. And finally, one of the last points of discipline, one of the people that gave us the tips earlier on talked about, is sometimes it's actually down to the ability of the employees to speak correctly or speak engagingly. I said earlier on I didn't really want to tune out the enthusiasm in people's voice, but there are different ways of speaking correctly that can engage with your customers. And maybe it's not the fact that the customers aren't hearing you, it's just that maybe your staff aren't engaging them. So that's why you're getting these questions or requests to repeat themselves. So Plantronics have partnered up with Crawford Communications to really look at the idea of a speech impact course, where you flex your power, your pitch, your pace, and you pause occasionally to really get people's attention. And sometimes that has a much bigger impact than trying to speak louder above the different background noise levels that's going on inside your organization. So that for me is the slides covered here on the whole discipline or acoustic intelligence side of things. And like I said, the headset isn't going to patch up a really bad sound environment, but it can help you fix certain problems whilst you're on your way to getting those perfect acoustic conditions in your contact center.
Thank you very much for that. So some more food for thought there. So And I've learned a new word, fricative, which is the high frequency sounds of consonants.
Yep.
There we are. So that sounds a good word for countdown if there's any aficionados there. So we're now going to do top tips and questions from the audience. We've got quite a large number that have been sent in. Rachel, is the sound levels okay currently?
No, you're still quite pitchy at times.
Okay, well, we'll do a little bit of work on the sound. So top tips and questions from the audience. We're going to start with a audience tip. We do not allow cell phone usage on the floor. This keeps the more personal conversation type noise out of the equation.
That's quite common. I've come across that quite a few times.
So, Colin, I think that's got a good one there. Mike says we have designated areas for conversations.
Yep, we like that. If you, and you're more than welcome to come and do this at any point, but our building has 4 different work zones. So collaborate, concentrate, contemplate, and converse, I think, is the final one, but communicate, sorry. And the communicate areas are designed for intensive conversation, and they have much more aggressive acoustics treatment in those particular areas, so I think that's a brilliant idea.
Mike says we have 24/7, so where possible we seat same shift agents in specific areas. This helps to reduce the noise levels at the end and beginning of shifts. People coming in or leaving do tend to create a bit of noise, so that sounds quite a sensible one. It's quite a creative approach. Chris says we listen back to our calls to check background noise too. We listen back to random calls each week for training. We also pick up any other problems. The fans are a big thing currently, and also agents picking up the call and putting the headphones on. They sound awful.
Right.
Yeah, any solution to that one, Richard?
Again, it might be coming down to that idea that they have the wrong headset type at the moment. They're not comfortable wearing 2 earpiece headsets through their whole working day because they like to listen to what's going on around them. So if they're not on the phone calls intensively, they take them off to talk to somebody else. Whereas if you actually have a single earpiece headset, they could wear them the whole time and just use their other ear to listen into conversations. Then that way they wouldn't have to put them on every time a call starts.
I guess muting callers while they do it might be the other.
Generally it's tricky to do. There's a lot of actions to do there while you're doing it, so it might be just a case of either the giving them the choice to answer the phone call once the headset's on, because some places don't give a choice on answering call, or like I said, give them actually single earpiece headsets so that they're wearing them all the time.
Anesh says we use good quality headphones with noise reduction. So always better to use quality. Lisa says our call centre is closed off from the lunchroom and elevators by a series of doors. We have a notification before entering the call centre to please keep your voices down as we are serving our clients. Very good. Yeah. I think it's quite a sensible area. Definitely. Do you find banging doors a problem?
Not so much the doors, but I have been into a lot of places where the breakout space is directly onto the contact centre. And so people going in there to make tea and coffee, and of course crockery and cutlery is very high frequency.
Yeah.
When you bang them on the table.
I've been on a few calls where police cars have obviously been through, so I guess those are buildings that aren't air conditioned.
The other one as well is the idea that the call centre is built around the 4 sides of an atrium. So the building's a nice square with a big atrium up through the middle, and there's no acoustic treatment to stop any noise coming from the atrium into the areas of the contact centre. So that's quite a good tip, to just block it off completely.
Paul says we use water features and plants as well as screens. So
well, water features is kind of an early sound masking.
Okay.
My understanding was that that's where fountains came from. People used to walk around the fountains as a form of sound masking so they could have a conversation which wasn't heard.
Yeah.
So the water feature is good. Plants, I've heard mixed reports about plants as to whether they're particularly effective on sound absorbing, but they look nice.
Yeah, they do look nice indeed. On water features, one thing that a couple of contact centres been to had aquariums.
Right.
In them. May not have done anything for acoustics, but they actually found quite calming that the agents would feed the goldfish, and then people just sort of look at them. It would just reduce sort of stress levels down. So probably most famous aquarium I think in a workplace was in Finding Nemo, when the dentist had be interesting to know if anyone has tried aquariums in the world.
We've got one in our Santa Cruz headquarters. We have an aquarium in the office and a number of water features as well.
And was in the aquarium goldfish, is it, or is it sort of exotic?
Exotic stuff, but it would be, from my memory of it, yeah, it's not common on, you got your common goldfish in there.
Yeah, very good. So it'd be interesting to see if anyone's tried that out. Mike says turning up the volume of the agent's own voice feedback in their earphones has helped to lower agent voice volume. That sounds counterintuitive.
A little bit. It's called side tone, is the sort of correct technical term around it, and it's one of those areas of psychoacoustics that I don't think anybody fully understands. But if you're hearing your own voice, you probably think that you are talking louder, and it will encourage you to drop that voice. So again, one of the problems with the two-earpiece headsets is it deadens all of the other sounds, so you don't hear how loud you're talking. So this may be a good way to encourage people to talk a little bit quieter.
Okay, I mean, is there a sort of volume control on the side that you can adjust this side tone?
That would be something they'd have to set in their PBX or ACD system.
Ah, right, okay. So
it's not something we can set, but it's something that, excuse me, can be controlled at the PBX level.
So it's sort of something like an Avaya or Cisco box would probably set those in. And is it true, I've heard stories that the sort of quality of the headset affects how they look, affects the quality of the sound. Is that an urban myth?
It's perception, yeah. So if people think that they are looking good in the headset, if they think it looks a good, high quality, they will perceive it to sound an awful lot better. So we've got some research somewhere on that one. It's not particularly, that's not a myth, no.
Ah, so that's interesting. Interesting. Let's have a look. We've just got time for a couple more tips. We email each other instead of shouting across the office. I think this is comes down to the chat room thing.
Discipline.
Yep.
Good discipline.
So yeah, I think discipline is quite interesting. So let's have a look. I think we've got some more tips coming through into in the chat room. Rachel says, I think we should get fish in the office. It would be nice and calming. So I think it could be quite good from that. And we've got a tip in from Doug in the chat room. It says, although we have a rule in place where agents should leave their desks while on a break, we also have treats, chocolate, fruit, cookies, etc., but no champagne, set up at the back of the contact center behind a soundproof wall to encourage agents to move into that area.
Yeah.
So I guess the breakout rooms are a little similar to that. So there's the tip showing up in.
Sounds like it's worth going to visit that contact center to look at it, doesn't it?
Yeah, just sound like quite a good one. Paul says we increase the awareness by playing recordings to noisy agents, and then we have a laugh making fun of them. Yeah, I suppose we've got to be a bit careful on the difference between laughing at people and sort of bullying, but until they are shown evidence they're actually being disruptive, they simply don't accept that it's a problem for the people around them. As soon as they hear themselves, everything changes.
Yeah.
So I think that's
yep, we'd be a fine balance of getting that right. Yeah. Rule of shame, but yeah, sometimes, if you look at the age balance of these people, it's probably, some of them, it might be their first, second time in the workplace.
Yeah.
They've just not learned that workplace skill, so that, the word etiquette.
Yeah, and certainly, a lot of team competitions, I think, generate a great deal of noise. So things we need to watch. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I'm afraid that's all that we've got time for today. So just a quick thing. If you could, in one or two words, put through what did you like best about today's webinar. If you could type that into the chat room. Chris said, I like the sound of treats, I'm going to let my boss know. So I think that would be quite good. We always love a treat or two. In fact, a good treat today would be letting staff off early to be able to get to see the game. They're working evenings. Slides are also available on Call Center Helper. That's on callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. You'll be able to find the recording there, or you can go in the same link as you've gone through today. I know there's a lot of detail on Colin's slides, so if you want to see that again, the recording could be quite a nice way to do that. Our next webinar in the series, which is our 99th webinar, we're getting close to our 100th, is the Contact Center of the Future. That'll be next Thursday, and then we're going to be breaking for our summer season, and we're going to be replacing during our summer season our webinars with a chat club, where we're just going to open up the chat room with a range of topics. So in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be discussing contact center games. So we're just going to put details on that up in the next week or so. So just remains to say thank you to our two presenters, to Colin Rawlings. Thank you to Colin. Thank you. And thank you to Richard Kenny. Thank you, Jonty. And thank you for all of our audience for attending today. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you very much then. Bye-bye, everyone.